Hi, I'm Jason with Indianapolis Ordnance, and we've had a lot of customers call in wondering which parts kits they had, and they weren't sure what they had or kind of what model they wanted to get. So we did a demo here to show the differences between the models, how to identify which parts kit you have, or maybe how to select which one you would like to build. So here we have the STEN MK2, the Mark III, and the Mark V. All of these models have different types of barrels. So we'll start there and identify them through the barrels. On the Mark II, you have a straight cylindrical barrel with a short barrel shroud or a handguard. And this handguard screws into the barrel nut, which is located here. On the STEN Mark III, you have a full-length receiver that comes within an inch of the end of the barrel. And so the end of the barrel is going to have a step turned on it, and the barrel is held in place with barrel bushings. There's a bushing here that is riveted in place, and a bushing here that is also riveted in place. On the STEN Mark V, it's very similar to the Mark II, but on the Mark V, you have a front sight on your barrel, and you also have notches milled into the barrel for your bayonet lugs. So you can actually mount a bayonet on this. The hole pattern on the Mark V handguard is slightly different than the Mark II. The Mark II has 3 holes straight across in 3 separate rows. The Mark V has 6 holes all the way around towards the front and 1 row towards the rear. There is no set of holes in the middle. So that's how you identify them through the barrel. We can also identify them through the types of stocks that they have. If you look at the Mark II, and you look at the back of the trigger housing, the trigger guard comes within about 3/8 of an inch from the back of the trigger housing. On the STEN Mark III, it's flush, straight up and down, from the trigger stock, from the trigger housing all the way down through the trigger guard is straight. On the Mark V, you have about 1.5 inches between the back of the trigger housing and the back of the trigger guard. And obviously, the Mark V has a wooden stock and a wooden pistol grip, as well as a full butt stock. These stocks are interchangeable for the most part between the Mark IIs and the Mark IIIs. Sometimes they're not. The Mark II can accept the STEN Mark V rear stock. It cannot accept the pistol grip, but it can accept the rear stock. So, the STENs all function the same way. They have a lot of the same internal components. The differences are in the outside. Another subtle difference between all 3 models would be the magazine housing. On the Mark II and the Mark V, it has a pivoting magazine housing. And that's this right here. Your magazine clips in here, and it's got a little plunger here. So if you actually pull this plunger out, you can rotate the magazine housing down into a more compact position. And to move it back, you just pull it back, and it snaps back into place. So the Mark II and the Mark V have virtually identical magazine housings. Other than slight differences in how they're made, they are interchangeable. The STEN Mark III is different in that the Mark III has a permanently attached magazine housing that's welded to the receiver. So you can't take it off unless you cut it off. So those are the differences between the magazine wells. Another obvious difference with the Mark III is that it has a full-length sight rail that goes all the way down the top, and that's actually a result of how they originally made those. Originally they were run through a die and wrapped around a mandrel, and then this top seam was spot welded together. So that's how you can another key in identifying the Mark III from the Mark IIs and the Mark Vs. They have a lot of interchangeable parts. All of the trigger components are interchangeable. The trigger, trigger pin, the selector, the sear, the disconnector, all of those parts are interchangeable. You can take them out of one and put them in the other. You know, you might have to do some slight modification, which is common with the STENs. But they're very interchangeable. They use the same recoil springs, the same extractors in the bolts. Just another slight difference would be the dust cover. If you look at the STEN Mark V, the tip of this dust cover is slightly rounded, whereas on the Mark III and the Mark II, they come all the way out to a sharp point. And very often, the dust covers between the Mark IIs and the Mark IIIs are interchangeable. So there's kind of some basic differences between the models. Maybe that'll give you a better idea as far as what you're working with, you know, what parts kits you have, or what kind of model you want to build. The Mark II it's a little more versatile, and the Mark V are more versatile because you can take the barrels out really easily and take the magazine housings off. The Mark IIIs are not quite as forgiving. I know a lot of guys have used socket head cap screws in place of the rivets so they can take their barrels out easier. It's an idea. But they all function the same way. One is not more reliable than the other. They all function the same way. They just have slightly different features between the models. So, hope this was helpful. Stay safe and keep it legal.